All right, friends, welcome. It's week 6 lecture. We've got a little bit of housekeeping. Got a little bit of housekeeping discussion questions. As always, you have one due this week. You have, of course, some core assignments. And if we look at our class, we can see what is due. We have Playground, which is our Flask assignment. This week, we're entering into the Flask. So we're leaving MySQL behind, entering into Flask. We're going to do this for the next, I think, 3 weeks, just Flask. And then post that, we're going to start combining the two, MySQL plus Flask. So you got plenty of time. If MySQL feels awkward and those queries feel weird, we have plenty of time. We have the next 3 weeks to kind of make sure that we have those down. But what you'll do is you will create a Flask application that has some sort of routing that when you say, okay, play 5, it creates 5 squares, or play 1, it creates 1 square. So we'll be able to take that information from the route so that way we can handle that information. That's all you'll have today. And so we'll make sure that you, I would encourage to do this one where you understand routing, understand how that works, and make sure you do this practice assignment, but we'll kind of get there today. Today, what we're doing is I want to talk about just some terminal basics because a couple of you guys today have already sort of dealt with that with virtual environments. I can dive in on Thursday if you want with terminal basics, do a pretty in-depth understanding of your terminal. But I want to make sure we do that because we have to talk about virtual environments, and you need to have you need to have an understanding of your terminal in order for you to have an understanding of a virtual environment. So we'll make sure we do that. Then we're going to introduce Flask, download that with our virtual environment, and get to Flask routing, kind of introduce that, create our first route, run our file, and run our program. Now there's a structure that we're going to set up for files and folders and all that stuff. So we're going to have to, we have quite a bit of a class. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in.
I'm sorry. One really quick question. What
Yeah.
does the ERD stand for?
ERD.
What does that stand for? Yeah.
I think it's something relational diagram, like
Yeah,
uh,
entity relationship diagram.
entity relationship diagram. That's it. So thank you, Jeffrey. Entity. So it just how your tables relate, the relationships with it. That's the ERD. Just a visual representation of what's going on in the database. Great question, Kevin. Okay. In order for us to deal with Flask, we need to create what we call a virtual environment. And here's how I'm going to pitch you on a virtual environment. Here's kind of the thing that makes the most sense to me, so hopefully it makes sense to you. Let's pretend we're going to go hiking. We have a couple different options, right? I can have one backpack that has all of my hiking gear. Let's say that I'm able to travel anywhere in the world. I can have one backpack that has all of my hiking gear. And I put all my hiking gear in that backpack. Well, if I have everything with me, that's going to be a pretty heavy backpack, right? That's going to have lots of stuff, which could slow me down. Secondly, let's say that, again, I can travel anywhere in the world and there's going to be all sorts of different environments. Well, if I'm carrying one backpack that has all of my hiking gear, I'm going to be pretty frustrated if I'm in Sedona, Arizona, and it's 120 degrees, and I'm carrying this big backpack that has ice picks and ice shoes and cold weather gear. Because I'm going to sit and say, why do I need all this stuff? Because I don't need my heavy snow jacket or my face warmers or my ice picks if I'm going to go hike the Grand Canyon, right? Or hike in Sedona. This is the desert. It is rock. It's hot. I don't need that stuff. Same way as if I'm going in, if I'm going to hike Mount Everest, I don't need any hot weather gear. Now that one's a little bit harder because a lot of the hot weather gear, like sunglasses, sunscreen, you'd still use on Everest, but same sort of idea, right? I don't want to take all of my gear with me all the time. Doesn't really make sense. I want to make sure that I've got a hiking backpack for each type of environment. For my desert, I only take my desert gear. For my winter, I only take my winter gear. If I'm just hiking through the Cascades in July, which are the mountains by Seattle, well, then I'm going to have different gear than even if I'm hiking through the Cascades in January, right? And so this idea of a virtual environment is you can think about it as your backpack for your project, right? It's all the things that you need, just like in hiking, you need water, you need food, you need, XY sunscreen, whatever. It's everything that you need, but we want to make sure that we're not bringing extra stuff with us, right? We're not bringing our cold weather gear if we're hiking in Sedona, Arizona in August, right? It doesn't make sense to me for me to have a negative 50 -50 degree sleeping bag when I'm not even going to go sleeping. It's a day trip, right? And so what a virtual environment does is allows us to compact all the things, all the dependencies or all the requirements for a project and just say, okay, this project just needs these dependencies. I don't need to bring all my extra gear. I don't need to bring all my extra stuff. I just need this. And allows us to compartmentalize that instead of lugging around some big backpack that has all sorts of stuff that I may never use, right? If we're doing data visualization, then we might use pandas, we might use matplotlib, we might use Seaborn. If we're not, we don't need that, right? If we're not using Flask, I don't need to bring Flask along with me. And so what a virtual environment does again is allows us to compartmentalize all the dependencies to a project versus just saying, cool, take everything with you, because then our project can run quicker. It isn't so bloated, right? We're not bringing in packages we don't need. It doesn't confuse other developers of like, why is this package here? Where is it being used? So it's a way to kind of clean up our space. Cool. Any questions on what a virtual environment is? Does that make sense? You put a 1 in the chat if that makes sense. Or just come off mute.
So pretty much the virtual environment is just taking what we need for the instance that we're going to be using, pretty much.
For the project that we're using. Yep. That's just what we need for that project.
Got it.
Now you could, in theory, have a Flask environment where if every project, I'm going to tell you don't do that. I want you to practice just having your own, because in reality, when you're working, you're going to have separate environments. In theory, you could have like a Flask environment that has, Flask and PyMySQL and bcrypt. Like you could have that if it's going to be the same. But for us, I want you to make a new environment for each class or for each project. So that way you can practice A, terminal use, and B, understanding what goes with each project, because that's going to be more so what it's like. So what we do is you should have pip installed. If you have Python installed, pip should be installed. If you get to a point where pip is not installed, and I know Estrella went through this, I actually went through this with my other computer too. You might need to just totally uninstall Python. So if you have 2 different versions, it might get confused. You might want to look at your environment variable if you're on Windows. Anybody in Discord can help you. Anybody in Dojo Hall can help you with something like that, or you can put it in Discord. But you want to make sure that you are installing pipenv. Pipenv is, you can think about that, that's our backpack. That's saying, cool, let me grab my backpack and bring it with me. Now, what you want to do, and this doesn't help, but we want to make sure that we're understanding how to deal with our terminal. So here, I just opened my terminal. Now, if you're on Windows, I'll try to tell you what the command is. But here, if I type ls, I am at my user level, right? I have access to a whole bunch of stuff that some of that I accidentally made when I was young, or kind of NLTK _ data or interview test or hello world, right? But really you should have your desktop, your documents, your downloads, all that stuff. Well, I want to go to where, let's say this class is, right? Now there's 2 ways I could do it. I could go on my Finder. I could go into desktop, into Coding Dojo, into, you guys are January Flex, go into week 6. And what I could do is I could right click and say new terminal at folder. That would do it. But I want to teach you some basics real quickly so we can navigate to that. I know that this is my desktop, right? And if I come here, this is desktop. What this is this is a GUI, a graphical user interface for me to be able to click and navigate into a folder, right? From desktop, I want to go into Coding Dojo. Coding Dojo, I want to go into Instruction CD. Instruction CD, I want to go into January Python Flex. When I go into that, I want to go into week 6, right? That's where I want my environment to be. I can do that on my terminal. And I would encourage you guys to get used to doing this. You're going to need to do it whenever you get a job. You're going to need to be able to deal with your terminal. So just, it sucks at the beginning, but just get practice. And this is my preferred way to do it anyway. So if I want to, I'm currently here at my user. I want to go into my desktop. I'm going to type CD. Then I'm going to type, it. Now I can either type it all out, DESK, that's fine. Or if you saw, I can also just press tab. And as long as it is unique enough, if it's not unique, right here it's saying, hey, which one do you want to go to? There's 3 of them that match this capital D. I could say E, press tab, and then it auto completes for me. I like to do this because sometimes I type and mess up. But now when I do that, you can see that I'm in my desktop. If I type LS, I have access to other things, right? One thing we can do, since we know CD tilde takes me all the way back. Since we know where it's at, we know it's in desktop, and then in desktop is Coding Dojo, and then Coding Dojo is instruction. Instruction is January Python Flex, and then within that's week 6, right? Estrella, I made you CD into every single one. There's an easier way. You could say CD desktop, Coding Dojo, right? So if you know your folder name, you can just put a slash. Now, because I have a space, this is what we call an escape character to say, hey, don't worry about that space. I know it's in instruction CD. Within instruction CD, I have a Jan Python Flex, and then I have a week 6. Now, in just that one command, I am now in week 6. So if I say ls, you see I have class overview, server py. I look at my code, I got class overview, server py. Cool. So CD is where we want to go. Let's say that I went one folder too much. You can always say CD space ... and that goes backwards. So now that is there. So right now I'm there, so I can go to week 6. Now here's where I say pip. So I've already downloaded that. So if I want to create my environment, I say pip env or pip. Yeah, I think it's just pip env shell. So it's creating my backpack for me. And you can see that here I now have this. And if I say ls, which is viewing it, I now have this pip file, which is basically, this is a file that's created to say, here are the requirements, here are the things that are required for you to have that. Now, let's say that you accidentally create this, like Jeffrey and Estrella, you guys accidentally created it in the wrong folder, right? And it might give you some errors, might have some issues. All we have to do is we have to navigate on our terminal to wherever this file lives. Then from there, we just say, if you're on Windows, you just say del pip file. If you are on Mac, you can say rm-rf pip file. Now, if I say ls, it's no longer there. Cool. So now I created this ls, it recreated my pip file again. So I can delete it and then navigate to the folder, the project folder that I want, and then I create my environment. Cool. Now what I need to do is I need to download Flask. So I say pip env install Flask. And what this environment will do is it will install Flask within my pip file, and I should get a pip lock, which again just shows my dependencies. So that way, if somebody else, like whenever I grade your exam, I just have to say pip env install, and it'll go through your dependencies file, and I can do that. I don't have to go through and like do all sorts of stuff. So now if I come here, we see that we have a pip lock file. Now what this does is, again, if I were to download this, and maybe I don't have this environment, I create a new one, and then I say pip env install, it's going to tell me all the things that I need to install. Mainly Flask. But whenever you download Flask, you download It's Dangerous and Workzerg and all that stuff. Workzug. Yeah. So cool. Our environment has that available to us. Great. Any questions on virtual environments? I'm going to pause and make sure that we're all good there.
I have a question, Will.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
You just said cd dot dot, it means take you back, right?
Take you
So-
back one. Mhm.
Okay, so how about like ls? What's the meaning exactly?
Yeah, great question. LS on Unix or Mac, or it's dir on Windows, just gives you basically a visual. It's like I'm looking into what do I have access to. It's the same thing as if I were to double click on this and then now I see this, right? Double clicking, actually it'd be more so like I clicking this button. I have a visual, but I'm not changing where I'm at, right? I can visually see what I have now. Right, it tells me what files I have access to, but I'm not jumping into that yet.
Oh,
Or
I see.
I'm not doing anything. Actually, no, sorry. If I'm LSing, sorry, I sort of misspoke there. If I am LSing, that means I've already clicked, I'm already in here, and it's just giving me and printing out what do I have access to. So it's just saying what files are available at this current location. So oftentimes, if I don't know where a folder is at, or I can't remember the folder name, you can just type dir if on Windows, or ls if you're on Git Bash or Mac or Linux. And then you go like, oh yeah, it's called Coding Dojo or whatever. So just kind of lets you know what you can currently see, what is within your scope.
Oh, okay. And how often are we gonna be using it? I mean, like, which one do we use more? Is it ls, cd dot dot, or which one else?
You'll use all of it. You get really familiar. It's very, very common to use your terminal. I will use it a lot throughout our class. So both of them are going to be necessary, super necessary.
Thanks.
Maybe on Thursday I can give like a full overview of the terminal and like how to do stuff. with it.
Yes, please.
Okay, I can do that. But regardless, we've got our environment. We have Flask installed. Now, we are going to sort of kind of follow along with the platform, but we want to make sure that everybody fully understands Flask. Now that we have Flask available, we need to create a whole bunch of different functionalities or a whole bunch of different base sort of pieces for Flask to operate. Now, these are important that they're called certain things like server PY or templates, because it allows us to do certain things. And within that, we have different code, right? So I've already created the server PY. And so what I want to do is I can put this even up like, but I don't want to put it side by side. Is you can copy this if you want, but I'm going to type it out. So I'm going to say from Flask. Now this Flask is what we have already downloaded, right? This is what we just downloaded on pip env. Say install, or sorry, import Flask.
Okay.
This is
Uh,
this, one second, Kevin. This import is importing Flask or importing the module of Flask. So I have access to it, saying, cool, our environment has this entire Flask package. I specifically want to bring in from that on this file alone. I want to bring in Flask. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, so what I did was I opened up the open at the terminal, and then I went to the Hello Flask folder, left clicked on it, and I selected copy as path, and then I clicked that in my terminal, and then I went pip env install Flask, pip env shell, and then python server.py, and said no such file or directory.
I'll have to look at it. So I can look at it
Okay.
after class, but
Okay.
what that tells me is either you don't have, you're probably not on this right structure. If it's saying no such file, that means that you're currently located in the wrong folder, the wrong
Okay.
area. Yeah. Cool. Now, whenever we're doing this, we're creating a server, right? Our Flask application. And so what we do, the next line is we say this app equals Flask. Now, this is the method that we brought in, and then Dunder name. So we're passing Dunder name, and we're going to see why here in just a second. But it's not super important that you know what every single line does. Just know that these are sort of the building blocks and things that you have to do, and you'll get practice with it as you go. Cool. Now I'm gonna just finish this off, and then we'll kind of talk about the next thing. So if Dunder name equals, and then here we have main. Then I want app.run debug equals true. Now what this does is this is allowing us and saying, here's my main application, right? If this is main, then I want to run the application. So this is what's going to actually allow us to run our Python server, or our Flask server in its case. Now, when we are creating this and running this, our server has what we call endpoints, right? So it's saying, hey, when we log on to localhost 5000, and if you're on Windows, or sorry, if you're on Windows, you're fine. But if you're on Mac, Jeffrey, you have to say port equals, and then you could just say 5001 because Mac, for some reason, took port 5000. So you can't, you'll get an error. It'll say port already taken. So make sure you change it to port 5001.
Yeah.
So what this is going to do is this is going to spin up our server, right? In order for us to use that, but we need some sort of functionality if we want to visualize that. So this is where sort of our beginning understanding of routing is going to come in. We're going to have what we call a decorator. And what this is it's going to be an @ sign and then app, which is our actual server, .route. And then we're going to pass in the route that we want to handle right now. So what this is doing is this is doing the same thing as, oops. This is saying if somebody goes to localhost 5001, and it's 5001 because I changed the port, by default, Flask is 5000. So if you're on Windows, just do 5000. So it's saying if somebody goes there, what do you want us to do? Right? What does our server give back? If they make a request to that endpoint, what does our server give back? So here's where we're going to write a function to handle that. So I'm just going to say def index return hello world. So if somebody goes to localhost 5001, they will get hello world. That's all we're giving them back. We're saying, okay, if we get a request to localhost 5001, give them back the string of hello world. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. Are there any questions on what I just did?
So just to get clarification, so from the Flask import Flask, we're pretty much just pulling the folder that we just were in the virtual environment, correct?
We're saying from the Flask installation, there is a method called Flask. I want to bring and utilize that. Now, everywhere, Flask is available everywhere, right? Because we have that in our environment. But each file we modularize and say, I only want to bring in what I need onto this file, right? So it's not bloated. Like I could just say import Flask, right? I could just say like import Flask. And if I did that, then I'd have to say Flask.Flask. That would be fine. But it doesn't look very nice, right? So we can say import from Flask import, and we're going to import quite a few things. We're going to import requests, render templates. We're going to import a ton of stuff. So we're gonna have, session, we're gonna have a bunch of stuff. For right now, we're just doing Flask just to get our server up and running, get everything going. But yeah, we're basically saying from that file in my environment, I need this specific piece. If I have a first aid kit and I fall down and skin my knee, right? I open up, I might have in my backpack, I might have a full first aid. I just need to go get one Band-Aid. Does that make sense?
Okay,
Cool. So now if I come here, I have my environment open, I can say Python 3. And then I give my server.py. I have to say Python 3 because I am a Mac user. If I'm Windows, I can either say Py or just Python. And then I give my file name. In this case, I do server.py. This is me starting it. If I get this, that means we're good to go. And it's going to 127.0.0.1, which is the same thing as localhost 5001. So what I can do is I can come here, get rid of that, and say local host 5001. And you see I get hello world. Just to prove that it's working. You could do this, refresh, and then it changes.
cool, you spelled it right.
Yeah, woohoo. So this is your first usage of a Flask server. Are there any questions on what we've done so far?
No, it's just pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. So you have to type all of that in and then go to your terminal and type in Python server.py.
We have to actually start our server.
Okay.
Oh,
Now
I have
you
a-
could do it here, or let's say Control C will kill your server. But if you wanted to, you could go to like your terminal, new terminal. You could do the same thing, pip env shell, and run it here. I just like running it outside of. I think it gets too busy if I do it all within. But yeah, you could do it on either. And if you just press the up arrow key, that'll happen. Sometimes just as a heads up, when you are typing out code and maybe it's not done yet, it might kill your server. So if you type and then you go back and try to test it and it's down or it doesn't work, just go and you might need to restart your server. Might have been an error that killed it, and then you just Python 3 server.py and then it restarts it again. Unless there's an error and then it'll tell you, here's the error, I can't run the server because of XYZ, then you go into your code and redo it. Go ahead, Jeffrey. Sorry, I know that you had a question.
Oh yes. I don't know, but I think I'd seen like a shortcut rather than like typing. On Mac, I think it was like command plus click, if I'm not mistaken.
To start your server.
No, like you see the link, the HTTP. Yeah, 127.0 localhost pretty much. Yeah, once like you just click on command plus click, it should just pop up if I'm not mistaken.
Main plus click. That's what I'm
Yes.
doing right now.
Well, I mean once you double click on that link, yes.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I could do that. Right. Yeah, this was just a
Oh, okay.
this was just because I put it as a comment. Normally you're not gonna have that, but yeah, in theory I could just do that. And it takes me there. Yeah. Cool. Are there any other questions? Again, making sure that you should see on your left, your environment lets you know you have your backpack with you, you can go. And then we created our first web server. We imported the Flask class. We used our decorator for a route, what we call a route method. So let's make another one. Let's do another route. We'll just call it about. And so let's create a method. Maybe it just says about page. And so we check our server. We're good to go. let's go back to my code. So I have a hello Estrella, but if I go to a different route, let's say about, you see I get about page. So now I can start handling my different routes, right? So now I'm saying, okay, if it goes to this route, here's what I want you to do. If it goes to this other route, here's what I want you to do. Cool. Now, there's a few things that we can, let me see, I want to make sure. Yeah, okay. When I'm dealing with routes, there's a couple different types of routes. By default, if we just have it set up this way, this is what we call a GET request, right? By default, it's going to be a GET request. Most languages, their default is a GET request. If I wanted it to be a POST request, which is really what the main sort of request that you're going to get, I could say something like this, and I type methods equals, say POST. And what this would do is this will say, hey, expect a POST request to this route. When we get to forms, I think next week, then this is when it's really going to come in handy, but just know that there's different types of methods associated to our requests. These are HTTP request methods. There's POST, GET, that's right here. GET, which is, hey, I want to get and retrieve my information. POST, which is I want to give, and you can sort of think about this as create some information, oftentimes comes from a form. Put and patch are I want to edit my information. One of them, put means that you have to give all the information. Patches, you can edit just one piece of information. And the delete is pretty self-explanatory, where you can delete a piece of information. Cool. So we have a couple of different routes, but I want to make these dynamic, or I want to be able to take some information from my route and handle that in a specific way, right? So let's say I want to make a route that takes in, hello and a name, and then maybe we can kind of handle some information by doing that. Well, what I can do is I can go, so I'm going to say, oops, create a route that accepts a parameter such as name. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I guess, yep, do this. I can say app.route. In this case, I'm saying user slash, and then here's name. And so what this is doing is this is saying, hey, anything after this, anything after user, I am just like Estrella, I am associating and calling that a name. This is a parameter, route parameter. And so what I can do is I can create a method that handles that piece of information. Now, anytime I've got a route parameter here, anytime I've got a route parameter here, my method or my function under associated takes in that piece of information. So in this case, user, these could be arbitrary. These are arbitrary, right? They could be unicorn and cupcake, doesn't matter. The name of my function. But this matches this, right? Then now I have access and I can do anything I want with that piece of information. So this allows it to be dynamic, right? Instead of me having to say, okay, set up a route for user slash Kevin, set up a route for user slash Jeffrey, set up a route for user slash Estrella, I can just set up one. And then now whatever I type in, Jeffrey, Estrella, Kevin, it's going to be dynamic and it can adjust to any of them. So I go check, this is working. Let's come to my code here. It's no longer about, but I'm going to say user slash Kevin. And we see hello, Kevin. I could say user slash Jeffrey will, I can do anything I want. This is me taking a route parameter. I'm gonna pause there. Any questions on this one? Again, we identify that this is dynamic by having the carets on each side, or the greater than and less than sign. We bring that into my function, and then I can use that wherever I want. So if I had, I could use some math or something. If I had some sort of functionality, I could do that. For right now, we don't really need that. Does that make sense?
Yes. It seems, it's not a lot. It's just like, I guess, kind of get used to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're
Isn't
gonna
there,
go ahead, Kevin.
yeah, isn't there somewhere in that app.run where you have to type in localhost somewhere?
You don't. It's gonna be default. It's gonna say localhost.
Oh.
Yeah, because it's running right now on localhost 5000. Cool. Now you can pass in as many route parameters as you want. But what this is going to do, remember, it doesn't differentiate between, like if I, and this is something that's important, if I have it down here and I say app dot route, and I say, let's say Josh. And then I user2 hello Josh. Let's see what happens here. What do you guys think is going to happen? You think it's going to do Josh, or do you think it's going to do this top one? You can say, well,
Well, does it override or does it cancel after the first one has been posted?
yeah, let's check, right? So this one, if it does do this, then it'll have a bunch of exclamation points. And if it doesn't, it's just going to say hello Josh. Cool. Server's still running. Let's go test it. User, and I say Josh. Yeah. So this is something that's really important to know about routing. Is when you have this sort of catch-all, okay, you should expect some sort of value. If you have another route that's similar, that's maybe a special use case, it's going to start top to bottom and it's going to check it and say, is this the route of user / something? Or Josh, right? And it's going to say, nope, that's it. Is this user / Josh? Nope. Is this user / Josh? Well, this one says it's user / whatever you want it to be, right? And so it's going to say, okay, this fits. That works great. Where here we know that it's user / Josh, and that's a special case. So if I am doing that, right? If I have some sort of really unique, this is not super common, but let's say you had a really unique thing. If you did, you'd really build that into this, functionality, build like a conditional statement. But for this sake, just so we know, if I say Josh, ooh, let's see, what's this one? User / Josh, user / Josh.
Isn't it supposed to start with a capital J?
Yeah, I did that, and then it took it as a lowercase j. Oh. It keeps defaulting.
Ah.
See how it's defaulting to that? There we go. Okay.
I was gonna ask, is it cap sensitive?
It is cap sensitive, right? And so because it was defaulting to lowercase j Josh, because whenever I type it in and I press enter, it was, if you looked at it, it was showing that. It was just going to name, right? Because it's saying, hey, lowercase Josh is different, uppercase Josh. But in order for us to get our unique one, it's here, right? Again, you're not really going to do anything like this. Like I'm going to delete it because you're never going to use that. But I just wanted to show that if we are ever using this, we want to make sure that, and especially in our testing, it can drive you crazy. Like my route works. Why is this not working? It's because it goes top to bottom. And so this is a pretty open thing. So anything, if user / anything, it's going to refer to that as name. So we want to make sure that we're not careful, but we're accurate with our routing.
So right when you run the router, it checks in kind of a sequential manner each of the different at apps.routes.
Mm-hmm. Here to here to here. Yep, exactly.
So what is that second one? The method post again?
So if we're dealing with a post request, which we're not going to deal with until next week when we get into forms, we're going to grab the information from forms. When we're doing that, that is a post request. We're going to talk all about HTTP request methods next week, but I just wanted you to see if you're trying to move forward. If you do have anything like this by default is a GET request. This by default is a GET request. If we want anything other than that, we have to specify and say methods post. But again, we're going to talk about this. That's really just coming from a form. Now, one thing to note is when we are dealing with parameters here. Nope. App.route. When we are dealing with route parameters, this is going to be a string. Anything we get from my route is going to be a string, right? So if I am taking in a number and I need it to be a number or a number type, right? What I can do is I can what we call typecast. And so within this, I'm saying, hey, this value age, I want to typecast that as an integer. And so when I'm dealing with age down here, it is of integer type. If I didn't do that and I just did age just like this, then what that's going to do is that age here is going to be a string. So if I was doing any sort of conversion or think about like a bank and I was trying to, for some reason, I was putting my deposit amount through that, then it's not going to work, right? Because I can't add or do any sort of calculations on a string. And so if you have anything to do with a number, like when we're dealing with IDs, we're going to deal with that. It's not a string, it's a number, right? It's an integer. That's how we set it up in our database. Then we need to typecast that parameter as an integer. This is kind of a silly example because that's then putting it into a string. So it doesn't really do what we're trying to do, but you know, if I wanted to say like birthday equals, you know, birthday equals not 21. We'll say age +1. Your birthday is tomorrow, and you will be, let's say, birthday years old. Cool. And so what this will do is now that I have done that, right, now that I have typecasted that, I can do this calculation. I can say user / will / 45. It says, hello, Will, you're 45 years old. Your birthday is tomorrow and you will be 46 years old. Now note, if I don't do this, I say age. Anybody have any guess what it's going to say?
I think you're gonna get an error.
An error? Let's see. Yeah. Can only concatenate string, not int to string. And so because this is in this is a string and this is an integer, saying, hey, I can't do that, right? Cannot do that. This has to be of integer type. So I say int. Now, and here we check, okay, we're still rocking and rolling. So we refresh, and now we get your birthday is tomorrow and you'll be 46 years old. So now we can do some sort of calculation. Again, we have to typecast that. Okay, I think that's where I want to end. No, I want to do one more thing. We might go like 3 minutes over. It's not super crazy. Now this is great because we have routes and we have, some routing and we're able to do some stuff, but we normally don't want to do this, right? This isn't really nice. We want to be able to have some actual HTML, have some actual create a full stack application, right? Where we're doing a front end and a back end. And so within Flask, within our Flask project, we need to create a folder called templates. Now it is really important that this is lowercase and spelled in the plural, templates, not template or temp or anything like that, or with a capital T. It's got to be lowercase templates. And here is where all of my HTML files are going to live. So in this case, I'm going to say index.html. Let's make this. And then maybe we say Flask intro. And then we make like an H1 that says welcome. Flask intro. Cool. So I want this HTML file to render when I go to index, just my index, right? Instead of just saying hello Estrella, though Estrella, you rock, we want our index file to show. So within this Flask import, right, my file, instead of just the class of Flask, I want to bring in render template. And so instead of returning this, if we come here and we look at our platform, rendering views, we can say return render template in the name of the actual HTML file we want it to show. So here I can say, let's bring that off. Let's say return render template index.html. That is my template file. Cool. This is running. And so now if I just say localhost 5001, we get this actual HTML page that says, welcome to the Flask intro. Maybe I'm going to say, you are on an HTML page. I come here and I refresh, you're on an HTML page. And so by, again, remembering, we're just creating a folder called templates, lowercase t, it's plural. We put all of our index files, or all of our, HTML files in there. The second thing we do is within my server py, I also bring in this render template. And now I have access to that, right? I have access to this render template here, or I have access to my HTML pages. I'm saying, cool, I can actually render this, and I want you to bring up this HTML page. So this is making it, in theory, making it sort of full stack, right? So now I can do some sort of static files. I can make it look nice. So I have my front end, my back end server. Now I'm just going to need a database, which we'll do in 3 weeks. And then we have our full stack application. Now we're going to do a lot more, right? It's not as this easy. But you sort of think this is the beginning of our full stack usage. Okay, I'm a minute over. I'm going to pause it. I'm done there. Are there any questions on? We talked a lot about virtual environments. We set up our Flask server for the first time. We handled route parameters, and we talked about rendering templates. Are there any questions on what we did?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. Okay. Well, then I'll stop the recording there.